Today's devotion is on actually they combined them. So we're going through the Apology to the Augsburg Confession. So the defense of what is the Augsburg Confession, kind of a further explanation of where do we get these beliefs and why do we believe this way. And this one is about the church. And it covers Articles 7 and 8 of the Augsburg Confession itself. And what it really does is it dives deeper in to what is the church. So the church at its core, it's a community gathered around the gospel. And there are details that are worth adding on to that, but the center of what the church is it is a community of people gathered around the person of Jesus Christ. And I'm going to take this opportunity, bear with me, to go on a little bit of a tangent. And it's based on a conversation I had with the youth recently, talking about the church and how, and the conversation was centered around how we view the church. Because in our culture today, in our tendencies today, we view church almost like we view a buffet table, in that we take what we want from it, we leave what we don't want, and if a certain church or buffet doesn't suit us, we go find another one. And that's not how we're called to view the church. If say on Sunday you come to Edgewater and I say something that you don't like, that makes you uncomfortable, but it's still a faithful thing, it's wrong of you to then go to another church because I said something you don't like. Because part of the church's responsibility, part of your pastor's responsibility, is to say things that maybe you don't want to hear, because part of the church's job is to call out sin. Is to say, like, we're called to live a certain way, and if that makes you uncomfortable because you're not living that way, it's the church's responsibility to do that. So it's not appropriate to leave a church just because they're doing something, they're saying something that makes you uncomfortable. It's also, the church, like I said, it's believers. It's a community of believers gathered around the gospel of Jesus Christ. And you're in that community. It's wrong to break that community because that church has made maybe some decision you don't like. And I had a professor who he spoke at the seminary. He was a little extreme about this. He said, when you go to a place, and this is kind of weird because he was speaking to a room of pastors, so we don't have nearly as much say. We go to the church that we're called to. But he would say, when you go to a place, you go online, you go to lcms.org, you go to the church directory. Whatever church, LCMS church is closest to you, that's the one you go to. If you don't like their worship practice, too bad. You belong in that church. You don't like the style of their sanctuary, too bad. You belong to that church. And his argument was, you go to the closest community of believers to you that has faithful doctrine. Okay, that's why his point was, you go to LCMS and you find the LCMS church closest to you. So you go to the church that has what you know to be faithful doctrine. And that is the church you go to, because the reality is every church is going to have parts that you don't like, because every church is made up of a bunch of broken sinners. You stick with it anyway. And there's a conversation to be had of, what if there's sin against me individually? We're called to grace. We're called to forgiveness. And I recognize that there are some practical concerns of, like, if I'm consistently being sinned against in this church, maybe the pastor has it out for you or something, which probably they don't. Maybe they do, but then there's a different conversation of there's unrepentant sin that we have to deal with. But the reality is, it's really hard to stick with a community if you jump ship every time something in that community goes a different way. So when we're called to this church, when you're in a church, you're part of that community. And even if maybe at that point in time the church isn't giving you what you think you need, that might not be what God's doing at that point in time. You might be there to give someone else what they need. So, and like I said, this is all a tangent, but I want to take this opportunity to talk about, because I think our fundamental understanding of the church is pretty easily understood now, and that it is a community of believers centered around Jesus Christ, Him crucified, Him risen from the dead. But I felt like this was a good time to take that opportunity to expand on. You don't just go to a church because you like it. You go to a church because it's a community you're called into. And you don't jump from church to church flippantly, right? This isn't like anything else where you go for the place that's the best fit. No. You're called to go to a church that is faithful to God's word. And a lot of the rest of that stuff, you put up with it if you don't like it. So sorry I went a little over. If you have questions, if you have comments, please put them below. I do, like I've said before, I check YouTube at least once a day, hoping to reply to any questions or comments that you might have. So with that, brothers and sisters, go in peace, serve the Lord. Thanks be to God.